Okay, how's everyone? Today's Torah portion is Vayishlach. If you're in the Blue Art Scroll Chumash, today's class is found on page 170. If you're in any other book, Chumash, it's chapter 32, verse 4 of the book of Bereshit, Genesis. So here we go. Let's just frame the story, because we're in the middle of a very, very dramatic story that began 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, Toldot, when the twin boys of Jacob and Esau were born. If you remember, their mother, Rebecca, had internal friction going on in her womb. She went to inquire and was told that by the great rabbis of the time, through the word of God, that she was having twins. And these two twins would be at odds with each other, would be wrestling with each other, not just in the womb, but throughout all of Jewish history, as Jacob would become the patriarch of what is the children of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, where we all descend from. And Esau was going to become the father of Rome, the first, the enemy of the Jewish nation. And Jacob and Esau represents two ideologies that clash with each other. Jacob, the Jew, the descendant of Abraham and Isaac, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel. And you then have Esau, which represents the nations of the world, anti-Semitism, who are at odds with the Jewish people. So what happened last week? If you recall, 2 weeks ago, Jacob had taken the blessings from his brother Esau, and last week he fled to the house of his uncle Lavan, where he ended up marrying his wives and having his children, and now he is returning home. As they say, you can run, but you can't hide. Ultimately, you have to face the music, and he has to come home and encounter his brother. So that's where we're at right now. Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim, the opening words of this week's Torah portion. Jacob sends messengers, and according to Rashi, it wasn't ordinary messengers, it was angels, it was malachim, mamash, literal angels, to his brother Esau, and he sends him an overture to try to make peace with his brother. And he sends him a message saying, listen, I've sojourned with Laban, and I've become very wealthy. I have oxen, I have donkeys, I have camels, I have abundant wealth, and I'm sending a message now to you, my brother Esau, that I want to find favor in your eyes, which means I want to live in peace with you. I know we had these hard feelings, this conflict, I took your blessings, but now I'm coming home, I'm a changed man, I'm a married man, I have wives, I have children, I have flock, cattle, I'm wealthy, and I want to make peace with you. And the rabbis say that Jacob did 3 things before going to meet his brother. And these 3 things remain the paradigm for each and every one of us, how to create peace, to avoid conflict, to overcome hostilities. What is the 3-prong approach and formula that Jacob formulated? The first thing he did was he sent gifts to his brother. He tried to appease him with kindness, with love, with generosity, showering him with words of praise and kindness. And if you listen to what he says, I'm sending this to my master Esau, so says your servant Jacob. He humbles himself before his brother, and he sends him these gifts. And the rabbis talk about how he spaced out the gifts in a long procession to make it look more elaborate and more impressive, as he sends his messengers, his delegation, to greet the face of his brother and appease him. Today we would call this diplomacy. You know, if you think about modern day diplomacy, you try to make overtures to countries, you give them gifts, financial incentives to make peace. It's beneficial for them, it's in their interest. This is what Jacob tries to do, and that's the first thing a Jew has to do. You have to try to make peace. And diplomacy means that you have to humble yourself sometimes. You even have to use excessive praise about your enemy and you have to shower them with presents and gifts to win their heart. But if that avoids bloodshed and that avoids conflict, it's well worth it. But you can't just have plan A, you need plan B. What's plan B? So the second thing Jacob does is he begins to come up with a strategy for combat, for battle. If he needs to confront his brother and fight, a Jew never wants to fight. A Jew never wants to engage in violence. But if necessary, we know that Jewish law says if somebody's coming to attack you and to kill you, you have a moral obligation to protect yourself and defend yourself, especially your wives and your children. So he comes up with a battle plan, how he's going to fight his brother strategically. He says, I'm going to make 2 camps. If he attacks one camp, then at least the other camp will be able to flee, and so on and so forth. But then there's a third prong approach. And it's not separate, but it goes part and parcel with the first 2. And that is he turns to God in prayer. He says some of the most beautiful words. He says, God, I'm humbled by your abundance of kindness that you've shown me. I crossed this Jordan River with my walking stick, and that's it. Now I'm coming back with wives and children and family and flock and everything, wealth, servants, maidservants. I can't even thank you enough, God. I feel so small and inadequate, so grateful for what you've done for me. How can I even ask for anything else? But please save me from the hands of my brother. So Doron, which is presence, Milchama, which is battle, and the third prong is Tefillah, prayer. And whenever we face challenges in life, we have to find a peaceful resolution. If not, we have to be willing to fight and always engage in prayer. So I like to think of, in a modern context, if you want to understand all of this today, all you have to do is think of the state of Israel. Israel has not known a day of peace since 1948. And the state of Israel follows the Torah's prescription. On the one hand, we're always making overtures of peace. Thank God in the last 2 years, we've had a few successful ones with the Abraham Accords, but Israel has always tried to make peace with its neighbors. But if peace doesn't work with all of the incentives of peace, then we're ready to fight. And Israel has fought many wars and won many wars because although that's not the natural condition of the Jew to be a warrior, right? You go to Israel, you see the young chayalim and chayalot walking around with their Uzis flung over their back. That's not what a Jewish boy or a Jewish girl likes to do. But if there's no alternative, what's the choice? You have to defend yourself. You have to protect yourself. You cannot allow your enemy to destroy you, obviously. So you're forced into battle. You're forced into violence, not because you choose it, but because you have no other alternative. But most importantly, is that the Jew understands that success, whether it's in diplomacy or it's in war, only comes with the blessings of Hashem. And therefore, we turn to God in prayer to find favor in Hashem's eyes, that we should succeed in our attempts to either make peace or to be victorious in battle. And here's where we hear Jacob saying his famous words that resonate so well till this very day. Verse 8. It says, Vayira Yaakov Me'od. Jacob was very fearful. Vayetzelo, he was distressed. And he formulates and divides his family into 2 camps ready to battle. So Rashi says, what are the 2 adjectives? He was afraid and he was distressed. Usually when you're fearful, you're distressed. And when you're distressed, it goes together. Why does the Torah say he was both fearful and distressed? And Rashi says the following. He was fearful lest he or his family members get killed. And he was distressed over the thought of having to do the alternative, which is to kill his brother. So Jacob says it's a lose-lose situation. If I get killed or family members get killed, obviously that's a tragedy. I'm fearful that I will lose my life or the lives of my family members. But even if I win this battle with my brother, and I kill him, I'm distressed over the thought that I need to kill my brother. And what comes to mind, of course, are the famous words of Golda Meir, who said that if peace will ever come between Jews and Arabs, we could forgive them for killing our children, but never forgive them for making our children kill their children. Not sure I agree with that quote that we can forgive them for killing our children. I don't think we could ever forgive them for that. We can't even morally forgive them for them because only the victim could forgive for murder. But the point is well made by Golda Meir that it's a tragedy as well that our children were forced into battle to defend their country and their land and their people and their families, and were forced to kill others. So, we tend to think about choices as being a good choice or a bad choice. What's the right choice and what's the wrong choice? But unfortunately, life isn't always so kind. Sometimes there is no two good choices. There's only what we call the lesser of the two evils. And obviously, the lesser of the two evils is rather than you getting killed, God forbid, we kill others in self-defense. I don't want to get into anything that I don't know much about, but I know there's a big trial going on in America now about a young man who, on the night of riots, was defending his property and killed two people. And I don't know if there's been a verdict yet, but there should be a verdict soon. And that's the question: was it self-defense? And of course, Judaism says that yes, murder is one of the 10 commandments, not to murder, but it doesn't say do not kill. There are times where it's necessary to kill, whether it's in war or in self-defense, and it's a commandment to defend himself. And here you see Jacob ready to defend himself, and even if it means killing his own brother Esau, he's prepared to do that if necessary. Thank God that's not the way the story ended, as you all know, the end of the story from last year, that he ends up making peace with his brother, but if necessary, he was ready. And I just want to point out that maybe the reason Esau made peace with Jacob was because he knew Jacob was ready to fight. So he took the alternative, which was to make peace. And that's a big part of self-defense. The goal of self-defense is hopefully that when the enemy sees that you are prepared to fight, that will be enough of the deterrent for them not to attack you in the first place. And today we see, again, just using the modern example, the modern Jacob, which is, incidentally, Jacob is eventually called Yisrael later in this week's parsha. We're going to get to that. That's a very big part of this week's Torah portion when he gets a name change. But it's called the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael. Why is it called the land of Israel? Because we encompass this ideology of Jacob, who became Israel, which is if you need to fight, you fight. And later on, he's going to fight with an angel of Esau and prevail over him. And hopefully when the world sees that you're ready to defend yourself and not be passive, that you don't believe in pacifism, you believe in defense and security and self-determination, the world will back off, as we see today, that the Arab countries would love nothing more than, God forbid, to destroy Israel and the Jewish people, but they realize that they cannot, and therefore they have not attacked. There hasn't been a war in many years. There's been terrorism, of course, but even that has subsided because Israel has shown their willingness to do whatever it takes to defend through self-defense, just like Jacob. And as distressing as it is, a lot of countries, after a war, they have a big parade, or in certain countries, like in Russia, they have certain days where they celebrate their military and all the tanks, and, in Europe, they march down, the soldiers go down the street and they're celebrated as heroes. I don't think Israel has ever had a military parade, even after the greatest victories of 67 and 73, right? Because there's nothing to celebrate. It's a tragedy that we have to do what we do. It's much better than the alternative, but this is not what we celebrate. What we will celebrate is when Mashiach will come, when the prophecies will be fulfilled, that nation will not lift up sword against nation, but they'll beat their swords into plowshares. That will be a day to celebrate. The military parade, who wants to celebrate military day or have a day to celebrate armaments or warfare or violence? It's a necessary evil in a world where there is evil. You have no choice but to fight evil. But Jacob says right away, I'm distressed over the idea that I would have to do that. So Jacob is now prepared to encounter his brother. And before he encounters his brother, and we see what happens between him and his brother, the night before, there's a major event. And this event is so major and famous that when you say you're an Israelite or a Jew, B'nai Yisrael, the children of Israel. That very name, Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael, Am Yisrael, whenever you see the word Yisrael, it originates in this week's Torah portion. So we all know that Abraham and Sarah were Sarai and Avram. They each got an extra letter in their name, and Avram became Avraham, and Sarai became Sarah. Isaac, the second patriarch, did not have any name change. But now Jacob, who was born Yaakov, because he was grasping the heel of his brother, which is Akev, has an experience that changes his name. And the story is in chapter 32. And the story is that Yaakov was traveling with his family, going back to the land of Israel, as we said. And they crossed a certain ford of Yabok, Ma'avor Yabok. And there was some kind of a river there, a stream, and they crossed over. And there it says, Jacob remained alone. Rashi says, why was he alone? Where were his wives and children? And Rashi said that he had left some items in the previous resting stop, campsite. He went back to retrieve them, and now he's all alone. And what happens? A man wrestles with him until the morning, till the morning stars, till the break of dawn. And at one point, this person or this man, the Torah says it's a man, who is wrestling with him, sees that he can't overpower him. So he strikes him in the socket of his hip. And Jacob's hip socket was dislocated as they're wrestling. And then when Jacob overpowers him, Jacob says, let me go, because the dawn has broken. And Jacob says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he says to Jacob, what's your name? He says, my name is Jacob. He says, no longer will it be said that your name is Jacob, but from now on, your name should be Israel. And from then on, and even later in the Parsha, Hashem comes and confirms this story by saying to Yaakov, yes, your name should no longer be Jacob, it should be Israel. Now, what is the meaning of this story? So we just go with the basic Rashi commentary, which says this was the archangel of Esau who came to attack Jacob to harm him. And when Jacob prevailed over him, he said, let me go because it's the morning time. Rashi says he's an angel. He had to go back to heaven to sing praises to God. And Jacob said, I will not let you go until you bless me. He says, what's your name? He says, your name is, my name is Jacob. He says, your name should no longer be Jacob. Your name should be Israel. And then later Hashem will confirm that that is his name. Now, a lot of interesting things about this. The first thing is that unlike Avram and Sarai, who just got an extra letter to their name, he gets a whole new name, Yaakov to Yisrael, completely different. Now, what is the meaning of the word Yisrael? So the verse says that he says kisarisa, which means you have wrestled with man and with God, meaning with an angel. That's another clue that this was an angel, and you have prevailed. So the word sarisa could mean to wrestle. So if you want to know what is the essence of being a Jew, Yisrael, why do we carry this name? Because we wrestled with man and with God. To be a Jew means to wrestle not just with the world around you, to try to make it better, to try to improve the life, to wrestle with darkness, like the holiday of Hanukkah that's upon us in 2 weeks from now, where we banish darkness with light, symbolically. But to even wrestle with God, we know that the greatest leader is Abraham when he prayed for Sodom and Gomorrah, Moshe when he prayed for the Jewish people after the golden calf. Judaism is not a religion of mere submissiveness. Like Noah, who was completely submissive to God. God said, build an ark. He went in, the world was flooded. He doesn't become the first Jew. To be a Jew means, of course, to be obedient, but also to know when to stand up and even argue with God, so to speak, even wrestle with Hashem, even to wrestle with the divine. That's one meaning of the word Yisrael. Another meaning of the word Yisrael is Sar Kel. Sar is like an officer, an ambassador. We are ambassadors of God. We are officers of God. We are meant to be a kingly, priestly nation, leaders to the world, rulers, guides, inspirational role models for the world. Sarkel. Another meaning of the word Yisrael, like Shema Yisrael, if you just take the word Yisrael and cut it in half, you have Yashar Kel, straight, be upright, be devout, be, wholehearted with God. So it has multiple meanings to this name, Yisrael. But what's interesting is the contrast between the name Jacob and Yisrael. Yaakov is the one who's grasping the heel of his brother. The word Akev means heel. He was called Yaakov because he came out of the womb holding on to his brother's heel. He's a heel grabber. Yisrael, it means not that you're a heel grabber, but you're a ruler. You're an officer, an ambassador of God. As a matter of fact, there's another. If you take the 5 letters Yisrael, you could rearrange the letters and spell Li Rosh, which means I am a head. Also, the word Yisrael, I pointed out many times, is an acronym for all the patriarchs and matriarchs. The Yud stands for Yitzchak and Yaakov, the Sin stands for Sarah, the Resh stands for Rivka and Rachel, the Aleph stands for Avram, the Leah for the Lamed. We are the children of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. But there's such a contrast between the name Yaakov and the name Yisrael. One is a lowly name holding on to the heel. One is a ruler, a head. A sarkel, wrestling with God and with man. Not wrestling with your twin brother's heel, but wrestling with God, with the divine. And also what's interesting is that when Avram becomes Avraham, it's the last time you hear the name Avram. He's forever called Avraham. Not so with Israel. We know the word Israel is used throughout the Torah, but the word Yaakov is used throughout the Torah. For example, Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe, Morasha Kilat Yaakov. The Torah that Moshe instructed us is an inheritance for the congregation of Yaakov, Jacob. So we maintain both names alternatively throughout the Torah, not just one singular name. So what is the meaning behind this name and how it was born out of this wrestling match? And the very next day, what happens? Jacob makes peace with his brother Esau. He bows to him 7 times, and ultimately they embrace and they hug and they actually kiss. And they agree to live in peace and go their own separate ways peacefully. So obviously, again, this story is a very important story. Now, before I get to the main lesson of the story, which is Yisrael, there's another very important lesson. The Torah says because of this story and the injury that Yaakov suffered in his hip socket, the Torah says until this very day, and this is part of the laws of kosher, the Jewish people, we should not eat the hind quarter of the animal. In the slaughterhouse, they take away the hind quarter. That's why you can't get kosher filet mignon. It's very hard to cut out that sciatica nerve. Because Jacob's sciatica nerve and hip was relocated and disjointed, we have to remember this episode. So both we have a positive way to remember the story by being called Yisroel, and we have a negative way by refraining from eating the hind quarter of the animal. So there are a lot of stories in the Torah, obviously. But how many stories say because of the story, there's a law to remember this story, that we can't eat the hind quarter of the animal. So it's very interesting and unique in that aspect. So just the one answer I saw given why we don't eat the hindquarter, I think it's from the Orach Chaim. He says that, why was Jacob alone? He went back to retrieve some items. But the $1 million question is, why did he have to go get it? If he was the elderly father and he left something behind, the children should have said, we'll go get it for you. Or they should have said, we'll accompany you to go get it. Why did they let their father go alone? And that's the introduction to the story. Jacob was alone, which symbolically means the Jewish nation, who's always alone and vulnerable to attacks. But the lesson of not eating the hind quarter of the animal is to remind us never to leave our elderly parents or any elderly Jew or person alone in a vulnerable position. We have a responsibility to take care of them and to look after them and to assist them if they need any help. But going back to the main feature, which is Yisroel. So there are many, many interpretations to this story. So maybe we'll just share a couple of them, okay? one of the interpretations is that this wrestling match was an internal wrestling match. What does that mean? Every person has two angels within inside of them. It's called the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, the good inclination and the bad inclination. And these two forces are always in conflict with one another. Now, the first thing to do is acknowledge that you have two forces, because or else the person feels like they're a hypocrite. One day I want to do good, one day I want to do bad. Am I good? Am I bad? What am I? So you can feel very conflicted and very confused by who is my true nature. And the answer is you have two natures. You have a body and a soul. You have an animal soul and a godly soul. You have a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. They're two angels. They both represent God. Even the evil inclination represents God. It's God's way of tempting you to build your character, to build your strength, to be able to have the satisfaction of overcoming the challenge and the temptation. So God put these two angels in you. So instead of seeing this as an outside external angel that's attacking Jacob, it's an internal struggle. And what's happening is it's the night before he's going to meet his brother. He hasn't seen him in 22 years. And he doesn't know how things are going to play out. But he has to do some inner resolution first. He has to say, who am I? He has to look back and say, from the day I was born, I've been wrestling with this brother of mine. I came out of the womb grabbing his heel. And then I bought his birthright because I wanted to be the firstborn. And then I took I stole his blessings. And when I came in front of my father Isaac, my father said, who am I? And I said, I am Isaac, I am Esau, your firstborn. I basically manipulated the truth and claimed I was Esau. I've been trying to be my older brother. I've been trying to usurp his role, his position. I've been trying to be someone I'm not. And he had to internally wrestle with himself when he was alone in his heart of hearts, in his own inner soul, to seek the truth and say, who am I? Now, this is a very important story. Why? Because if you don't know who you are, if you're not true to yourself, you can never be a leader or an inspiration to others. Many times leaders are always trying to gain popularity. And because they're trying to gain popularity, they're trying to say what everyone wants to hear. But leaders shouldn't be looking at the polls and trying to gain popularity. Good leaders or great leaders follow their inner convictions. But you have to be true to yourself in order to follow your inner convictions and not just try to seek everyone's approval and validation. So Yaakov now comes to the self-realization that his whole life he's been trying to be someone he's not. And that's the story of many people's lives, that we're envious of other people and we want to take what we don't have. And Jacob was the wholesome man who studied Torah in the tent. He didn't have to be Esau, the warrior, the fighter, the man of the field, but he wanted everything, so to speak. He wanted to be his brother Esau, maybe because he wanted the love of his father. He saw that his father had a special affection to Esau. He wanted that love. And it's only when Yaakov comes to terms with the fact that it's only when Yaakov comes to terms and to peace with the fact that I am who I am, and I need to embrace my identity and my calling in life and my true purpose and stop trying to be someone else. That is the prelude for the peace. That's the prelude for the peace that he's going to make tomorrow, the next day, with his brother. Because as long as you have inner conflict within yourself, there's going to be outer conflict with others. It's only when you find peace within yourself that you could be at peace with those around you. So the idea of Jacob wrestling is this internal dialogue that he had. And only when he realizes that I am Yisrael, I'm not Jacob, the one who's holding on to the heel of his brother. I am Israel. I am Li Rosh. I'm a leader for the Jewish people. I am meant to be in this world, not to be the hunter, but to be the big influencer in the world. As the descendants of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob have gone on to be the greatest source of influence in the world. Think about monotheism and the beliefs of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They weren't generals. They didn't lead armies. They didn't rule countries. But they didn't even make prophecies. They were just righteous people who shaped the world and influenced society, and then through the Jewish people and through Moshe and through the Torah until this very day. So it's only when Jacob embraces that role that he becomes the great Israel and we become the children of Israel. And again, the beauty of the Torah is that it's not a story that happened 3,700 years ago. It's a story of today. Think of Hanukkah that's coming up in 2 weeks. You had Jews who, like Matisyahu and Yochanan Kohen Gadol and the family of the Maccabees, who fought to preserve their Jewish identity. But then you had many Jews who became Hellenists, who assimilated and went into the Greek culture. And until today, it's painful to say this, but we're in 2021. We have Jews who are identifiably, proudly Jewish, adhering to the role of Yisroel. We are meant to be Jews in this world. And then you have Jews who are busy grabbing the heel of Esav, saying, no, I want to assimilate. I want to fit in. I want to be like everyone else. I want to be American before I'm Jewish. And we see this great divide of Jacob Jews and Israel Jews, so to speak. And till today, there's that allure of and the temptation of assimilation, of fitting in, of being like everyone else, of grabbing the heel of who we're not. And then there are Jews who are proudly willing to say, that's not my, of course I live in the world, I have to participate, but that's not my role. That's not my main priority. My main priority is not wealth and success and abundance, but rather the spiritual legacy of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to preserve that and to transmit that to future generations. And based on that, the next day when he meets his brother, he's able to make peace. You know why he's able to make peace? Because he's able to say to his brother, take these gifts from me. And if you look at the words in the Torah, in this week's parsha, it says, Kachnat birchati, take my blessings. Now, metaphorically, a gift could be, here's my blessing, but it could also be meant literally. Take back the blessings I took from you. The blessings that you were intended to get from Father Isaac, which was the material blessings, the fatness of the heaven and dew of the earth, you can have that back. My pursuits are not the materialistic pursuits. My pursuits are the spiritual pursuits of life. And only when he discovered who his true identity is and was willing to give it back to his brother, then he was able to make peace. Another alternative interpretation to the story, which is equally powerful, is that going back to the idea that it represents the good soul or the positive inclination and the negative inclination. You know, we all have conflicts within ourselves between good and bad, between doing what's noble and righteous and what's doing what is immoral and self-centered and so on. But what Jacob realizes, and that's why he carries both names, Yaakov and Yisrael, is that it's not either or. In other words, if you just take it very simply, I have my sublime, spiritual, godly soul, and then I have my more imminent, materialistic, animalistic soul, my ego that just desires pleasure and power and lust and honor and so on and so forth. And then I have my more transcendent soul. And Jacob goes through this wrestling match and he realizes, you know what, it's not either or, I can integrate the two. In other words, God gave us an ego, God gave us an animal soul, but not to reject it or eliminate it, but to rather to integrate it, to take the power and the force of the animal soul and the evil inclination and the ego and use it as a force for good. And that's why when he bows to his brother 7 times, he wants to reach his brother. Doesn't say he wants to reach Esav, he wants to reach his brother. He wants to say, you know what, we're brothers. We're meant to work together. So next time you feel an internal struggle, it's not always a question of how do I eliminate that negative desire or drive. It's how do I incorporate it? How do I put it in the proper context that my ego could be used for positive outcomes? And that's another idea behind the encounter and the struggle between Jacob and Esav, or the angel of Esav more specifically, and being able to harness that power and bow to your brother and make peace with your brother, not to be in conflict with your brother. Your animal soul, your ego is not your enemy. It's your brother. You have to discover the brother in it and reveal its potential for good. And everything in the negative could be used for the good. There's a famous story of the Kotzker Rebbe, who was teaching his students that everything that God made in the world has a good purpose. And and his students said to him, really, what good purpose can atheists serve in the world? Atheists deny God's existence. So how could why would God make atheists, or the concept of atheism? What benefit is there to this whole possibility that people could deny the very existence that created them and gives them life every second? And the Kutzker Rebbe said, I'll tell you why God made atheism. He said, when a poor man comes knocking on your door for assistance, don't say God will help, God will provide. At that moment, pretend you're an atheist and there is no God. Either you're going to help this person or this person will never get any help, because pretend there's no God. In other words, everything negative can be utilized in some positive form. And that's the idea of using the Esav within you and transforming it and utilizing it for a higher purpose. And that's what Jacob says to the angel. He says, bless me. I want you to become a source of blessing in my life. I want the negative impulses to be a positive outcome. And that's true in every struggle, every challenge we have in life. We always have to say, what was the positive result of this experience? What is the blessing I could extract from this story, from this experience, from this negative encounter that I had, from this wrestling match? So if you believe in divine providence, everything that happens has a reason. So if you go through a challenge, a hardship, a struggle, there always has to be a blessing. And that's why Jacob says to the angel, bless me before you leave. I want to receive your blessing from this wrestling, from this struggle that I just encountered with you. Right after he finishes meeting his brother, he leaves. And I'll just make two interesting observations. Verse 17 says, Jacob traveled to a place called Sukkot. We all know there's a holiday of Sukkot, and he built a house there for himself, and for his flock, he made Sukkot, which is shelters, tents, like a sukkah, like we have on the holiday. And therefore, he named the place Sukkot. And the question is, if he built a house for his family and tents for his flock, why not name the city Batim, houses, because he built a house? Why does he name it Sukkot, for the temporary dwelling he made for the flock? And rabbis say that was the greatness of Abraham. In those days, everyone built houses for themselves to live. What Jacob did, which was original and unique, was instead of allowing his animals to be in the sun and suffer from the heat, he built a shelter even to protect the animals from the heat, which was an act of compassion. And therefore he named it Sukkot, to teach us this lesson, that we have to also be compassionate and take care of all of God's creatures, even the animals. But then the verse 18 says, after Jacob finishes this encounter with his brother and they go their separate ways in peace, it says Jacob arrived Shalem, intact, in the city of Shechem. And the question is, why does it emphasize that he arrived intact? So Rashi says that he had healed from the injury that he had from the strike of the angel of Esav on his hip. He was intact with his money. He was intact with his being. But another simple way to understand the idea that Jacob arrived intact was that as much as Jacob had abundant blessings in his life, at this point he had 4 wives, he had 12 sons, he has a daughter, he has a huge family, he has wealth, success. But until he makes peace with his brother, he's not complete. He's incomplete. You could only be wholesome and complete when you live in tranquility and peace and serenity with your family members. If there are 2 brothers that are out on the outs with each other, or any other family member or a close friend that you've had a falling out, you're not at peace. You're not shalem. You're not whole. So he only arrives whole for the first time in his life, because he's been in tension with his brother his whole life. Finally, he is shalem. He is whole. He is complete. Before we move to chapter 34, which is another major episode, I just want to go back to one detail. When they approach each other, the brothers, Jacob offers his gifts to his brother, which I mentioned could also be read as the blessing, saying, here, take back the blessings I stole from your father, from our father. And Esau says, no. You keep the presents. Thank you, but no thank you. I don't want the gifts. And why does he say he doesn't want the gifts? Because Esau says, Yesh li Rav. I have a lot. I have plenty. I have an abundance. I have more than enough, plenty. I have enough. You could keep it. I have a lot. I have a lot of my own. I don't need your gifts. But Jacob insists that Esau take the gifts. And you know what he says? Take it. You know why? Because God was good to me. The Chiyeshli Kol. I have everything. Esau says, I have a lot. And to that, Jacob responds, I have everything. What's the difference between a lot and everything? A lot. I'm sorry. A lot means a lot, but there's always room for more. But everything means I have everything. Now, how can any person say they have everything? Does anyone have everything? There are things you don't have. But obviously, he means spiritually, I have everything, which means if I am happy with my lot, I'm satisfied, I desire no more, I crave for no more, I'm not envious or seeking more, I'm happy with my portion, then I have everything. You know, in the Birkat Hamazon, we say, bless us, God, Kamoshen is Baruch Avosenu, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Bakol, Mikol, Kol. Bless us like you blessed Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Bakol, with everything. Mikol, from everything. Kol, everything. What does that mean? It rhymes, Bakol, Mikol, Kol, but it's actually 3 words. With. Does everyone hear me? Okay, so by Abraham, it says when he had a child, it said God blessed him with everything, bakol. So that represents children. When Isaac was on his deathbed, he said, bring me food to eat, and I'll eat from everything, mikol. That represents health, that you could eat. Okay, and then there is the third element, which is kol. Right here, he says, I have everything. I'm going to have to cut the class short because I got a call that I have to go pick up my son. I'm just going to share one more thought. The next blockbuster event in this week's parsha is a story of Dinah being raped by a man by the name of Shechem, the son of Hamor. It's a horrifying story. There's mountains of commentary to be discussed on this. It's not a pretty story on any level. Okay. Basically, Dinah is abducted. Her rabbi is a little bit critical of her that she went out to neighborhoods she should have not gone out to and hung out in. That modesty is important. Not to blame the victim, but lessons have to be learned. The brothers, this man Shechem falls in love with her, wants to marry her, sends his father, who's a prince, to go talk to Jacob. The brothers come home from the field and they hear what happened. And they basically come up with a ruse. Shimon and Levi, 2 of the brothers, say, if everyone circumcises themselves in your city, we could marry into your community and our sister could marry your son. And that's what happens. They all circumcise themselves. And then on the 3rd day, which is the most painful day, Shimon and Levi take their swords and wipe out the whole city and take their daughter back. Now, when Jacob hears about this, he's very upset at his sons for doing what they did. And he says, you've made me now vulnerable to attacks from the inhabitants of the land. He was afraid. And they respond to their father and say, well, what are we going to let our sister be, a harlot, a zona? We have to defend her. We have to save her. She was abducted. Now you have to realize, it says they took their sister from the city, which means they were holding on to her. They were not releasing her. So it was a way of not just punishing the people, but freeing their sister. Now there's so much to be said here. Is it justified to wipe out a whole city? Why not just kill the man who took your daughter and raped her? Obviously, there's something called collateral damage. Again, going back to Israel and war. What happens when there's a terrorist attack and they abduct a soldier and Israel has to go into Gaza or to some other neighborhood and many innocent civilians get killed in the process? There's something called collateral damage. And where do you draw the line? And what's fascinating about the story is the Torah doesn't, it just says, Jacob says he's angry at the sons. He says, what did you do? You endangered our family. And they respond, well, what are we going to allow our sister to be, a harlot? And then the Torah stops. It doesn't tell us which side is right. It doesn't say who does it side with. Was Jacob right that they should not have done it? Or were they right that they had to do it? And it's almost like a moral dilemma that's unanswerable. They're both right. In other words, there's truth to what Jacob's saying, there's truth to what the brothers are saying. There are some situations in life, as we said earlier, that are just no good choices, only bad choices. The question is, which is the lesser of the two evils in the story? But so much so that Jacob on his deathbed, when he's addressing his kids, will eventually say, with your anger, you wiped out a city. That till his dying day, Jacob was upset at his sons for doing what they did, for wiping out the entire city. But like I said, either way, it's a very painful story, difficult story. But what's interesting is that, and this is really going to blow your minds, but according to Rashi, Shimon and Levi were only 13 years old at the time. As a matter of fact, the idea of bar mitzvah is learned from this story, because it says ish charbo, each man. They had just become men. They were only 13 at the time when they carried out what they did. But one thing is very clear from all of these stories, that, in another religion, they talk about turning the other cheek. Judaism definitely does not believe in pacifism. Judaism believes in peace can only come through strength. There's no nation that desires peace more than the Jewish people. But just like the Jewish people learned, sadly, throughout our history, that the only way to survive is if we are willing to fight for our self-defense. We just had Kristallnacht the other week, and we all say, wow, if we only had an IDF in the 30s, there would have been a different ending to the story, perhaps. But the point, obviously, is that going all the way back to the Torah, we realize that when all else fails, that's a theme in this week's Parsha, sometimes it is necessary to use violence, as abhorrent as it is. And I'll just conclude with the quote that someone once said, that if the Arabs around Israel all put down their ammunition, there would be peace in the Middle East today. But if Israel lay down all their ammunition today, there would be no Israel in the Middle East. And that goes all the way back to the story of Yaakov and Esav. Sorry to cut out short, but I wish everyone a great day and look forward to seeing you, God willing, on Shabbat if you can make it. All the best.